So last time we left off, we're still questioning Patsy about her handwriting, but the problem came into being that the depositioner, Mr. Hoffman, is sort of fighting with the Ramsey's attorney, Mr. Wood, in that Mr. Hoffman feels that Mr. Wood is giving too much information to Patsy to help her identify or to help bias her answers. And so they were supposed to be going to the judge in order to see what's appropriate to be on record and what's not. So let's continue.
Mrs. Ramsey, I'm going to show you a document that's been marked Plaintiff's Exhibit 10 for identification. And I'd like you to look at the document. Please look at it carefully. This document, for the record, contains 8 letters that are side by side, vertically on the page. The letter D, what looks like the letter S, what looks like letters R and O, what looks like an N, what looks like an O, what looks like an exclamation point, what looks like a G, and what looks like a B. Now I'm going to ask you, Mrs. Ramsey, if you can identify any of these letters as being your handwriting.
No, sir.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to look at these letters and tell me, in fact, I withdraw the question. I'd like you to look at the lower letter B, what looks like it could be a letter B at the bottom.
Left or right, there's a mark with some sort of a funny mark over it.
Yeah, looks like a little hat. Those letters, for the purposes of this discussion, look like they might be the letter B. I'm going to ask you whether you see any similarity in the two letters. Any visual similarity? You as a layperson, not as an expert, just looking at it visually, do you see any similarities?
And if I might have my objection.
Sure, at this point, please.
Simply that I object to the form of the question. I do not believe it's appropriate to ask a layperson a question that goes to what you might believe to be a question document issue from an expert, particularly when you have not identified the source of the writings before the witness. You have not identified and answered whether these documents have been in any way altered, blown up, enlarged, positioned differently. So I object to the form of the question for those reasons.
All right, and also,
She is scanning the page more so rather than reading, and she's not really reading for comprehension. She's got quite a bit of nervousness here, and I was noting some of her stiff movements, like doing that. Yes, sir. No, sir. You know, sort of like a defensiveness, a guardedness, anxious, nervous. You know, of course it's a formal setting, so she's trying to control those. So a lot of anxiousness and nervousness, rightfully so.
The question.
Also, for the purposes, I'd just like to state that this answer would not be used for any evidentiary purpose, realizing that there is no proper foundation as to source, as to how these letters came to be what they are. But I will just say one thing for the record.
Parsing, rolling the lips again, self-soothing, a little bit of hesitation and uncertainty there.
That lay people.
When you see her like this, but her shoulders are up, she's like this. She's listening, but proceeding very slowly into what you're doing. The tenseness is there between her and her attorney, because I believe this is an indication that Mr. Hoffman is closing in on something that they're uncomfortable to talk about, but that is potentially revealing.
Are under Article 9 of the Federal Rules of Evidence are occasionally allowed to identify handwriting as lay people. Frequently letters are shown to lay people, and they are allowed to authenticate handwriting to that degree if they have familiarity, which is one of the reasons why I asked you if you were familiar with any of the letters. Now,
And I did not object when you asked her whether she believed that to be her handwriting.
right, and that's all I'm
But
asking.
now you're asking her
No, I'm not
about
gonna
whether
ask her
there's
that.
similarity, and from a lay perspective, and I will accept your stipulation that you will not use that answer for any evidentiary purpose. And with that stipulation, you may answer the question.
I'd like you to look at the letter B and tell me if those B's look at all similar to you.
Well, they're both lowercase b's.
Is there anything about the B's that to you look similar beside the fact that they're lowercase? The way they're drawn?
No, not particularly.
Okay, I'm going to ask you then to look to the letter above the letter that we've identified as B and what looks like it could be a G. And I'm going to ask you to look at the G. And I'm going to ask you whether or not you see any similarities between the G's and what those similarities are.
Same stipulation.
Same stipulation.
Well, they're both lowercase g. They're both more the same size than the b's are.
Is there anything, what about the way in which what looks like what could be described as a tail with the G? Is there any similarity with respect to that?
It swings to the left.
Right. Do they look similar, the tails, to the G?
Somewhat. I mean, it's a
Just
G. You make a G with the tail to the left.
Okay.
Is that what you mean?
Those look similar, like similar tails.
You're talking about.
And the G.
Well, I mean,
again, I think she answered your question.
one's squiggly, and one is smoother.
Okay.
But I mean, depends on how many things you want to.
Just looking for whatever points of similarity that you, as
I
a
would say they're
layperson,
most
could say.
similar in
Or
size,
dissimilarity,
or
in
they're.
fairness.
All right, and dissimilar. You can just simply make whatever visual observations you want about it. I just simply want your reaction.
The one
to
on the
each-
right is more shaky. It looks like
And what about the one on the left?
it's not as shaky, and the one on the right has a little swoop up on the tail, and the one on the left does not.
Right.
The one on the left has a thicker circle of the part of the G, and the one on the right.
Now I'm going
Whoever is right here to her right hand side is getting really involved. I don't know if that's John. I don't know if that's the attorney, but whoever it is getting really involved. And now he's really watching, which lets me know that Mr. Hoffman is hitting on something that is potentially incriminating. Number one. Number two, Mr. Hoffman's got her out of her element.
ask you before I withdraw that question, do you have any other observations, similarities or dissimilarities that you'd like to express?
No.
All right, I'm going to ask you to look to what looks like explanation points, and I'm going to ask you if you see any points of similarity or dissimilarity. between
Same
the two.
stipulation.
Same stipulation.
Thank you.
Well, one's thick, one's thin, one has a bigger dot than the other. That's fat. That's
Anything
well,
about the
this-
slope or angle or anything else that's similar or dissimilar?
I don't know what slope or angle means.
Oh, the way in which it's going up and down.
Well, that's how you make an exclamation point.
Right.
It's straight down with a
Right.
dot under it.
Okay. So do they look similar or dissimilar with respect to how vertical they are?
Well, the one on the left is squigglier and leans at the top a little bit.
All right. I'm going to, any other similarities or dissimilarities before I move to the next one?
I don't think they look alike.
Okay. The next,
Who's ever over there is, I think he leaned over or got up and was looking more intently. It's almost like he's invading her space, to make sure that, he's super involved. I mean,
next objects or letters look like they might be O's, the letter O. Or they could be a zero from a number, but in any case, a zero or an O.
Or it could be even an attempt to make a Q.
Could be.
I think that's the lawyer. Number one. Number two. Now we're trying to shift. He's saying things. I can't remember the word I'm looking for, but he's saying very specific things. It's not the word I'm looking for. Intentional. He's saying very intentional things for the record to throw off. Could look like a Q. This is an O. Mr. Hoffman was very clear. But the attorney comes in and says, could be a Q, to try to drive home some uncertainty. So it's like a chess game. We're playing. I'm putting down, I'm moving a piece, but also too, I'm as a attorney, as the depositioner, I'm moving a piece, but as the attorney, I'm moving a piece as well, to try to, continue to play this game. Tit for tat is what it's becoming.
But you can identify it any way you like, Mrs. Ramsey, and please point out any similarities or dissimilarities that you see in Mr. Wood, the same stipulation.
Thank you.
I don't think they look a thing alike.
All right. So you'd say that they're just dissimilar. Could you point out their dissimilarities?
The dissimilarities,
Yeah,
one
dissimilarities.
is large, one is small, one is really heavy and feathered, kind of, and one is smoother.
Any other similarities or dissimilarities before I move on that you'd like to?
They both
make
have
up?
an opening in the middle.
Right, the hole in the donut.
Yeah.
I'd like you just to look up to the next letter. Now that could be an N, could be a truncated R, hard to say. I'd like you to look at that and just tell me.
The attorney is fully forward here. He is fully forward here, fully engaged. I mean, pay the man. He's doing his job, man, because he is in that paper. Whatever Mr. Hoffman is showing, Mr. Wood is looking at every aspect of that to analyze. Basically, before Patsy gives a response, I need to analyze all of this because you about to trip me up now.
What similarities or dissimilarities you see between the two letters.
M too.
It looks like a
Could be
pie.
anything. Yeah, could be. For all we know, it's a little horse or something that's truncated, or a poodle, actually.
A poodle?
One of those
Ooh,
show poodles.
I'm not seeing the poodle here.
Is this
Donna.
psych test?
This is right, a Rorschach
Yeah.
for attorneys. If you could look at that, those two letters, and with the same, Lynn, what is it? The same stip?
Same step.
Stip.
One's
Yeah.
shorter than the other one. The one on the right shorter than the one on the left. The one on the left has a little triangle thing over top of it.
I just want to draw your attention to the fact that they seem to merge. There seems to be, whatever it is, it seems like one thing is running into another, or there's something hanging off it. It could be, it's an awkward looking letter. It could be an R and an O. It could be any number of other configurations.
Which one are you looking? Are you looking at this one?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Are we still at the poodle? I thought we were going to move on after the poodle.
I thought we were still at the poodle.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I never saw a poodle, for the record.
All right.
Neither did I. That's why I'm staying
Fine.
there. Viewers.
You're not going to go there, Lynn, right? All right.
Oh, so you're at the third one down
Before
now?
I finish that, I just want to give you the opportunity. Do you have any other observations of similarity or dissimilarity?
Of the little
with respect-
pie one?
Yeah, the little pie.
No.
Okay, now.
I mean pi like a Greek letter
Yes,
pi.
exactly.
Pi r square.
Right. Now we'll move to the next.
Oh, now you know the Greek letter pi, and now you know pi r squared. I'm trying to throw out mathematical terms. Now you know those things. When Mr. Hoffman lifted the mood and made you feel less judged, now you can start to think about some things, and now you're talking more. Now she's coming out of her shell. Oh, I noticed this, I noticed that. Now that she feels less judged. He did that on purpose to pull her out of her shell.
Configuration, and whatever that is. I see it as an R and an O, but that's just the way I look at it. I'd like you to tell me what you see and similarities and dissimilarities between the letter.
Same step.
Same step.
That doesn't look like anything in the alphabet that I've ever seen. I mean, it doesn't look like a letter to me.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so no any specific dissimilarities, except that it just doesn't look like a letter between the two non-letter
Well, the one on the
looking-
right seems to be heavier and has a little piece sticking out from the left side, and the one on the left has a little bird over top of it or something, mark. And
All right.
it looks like they were made with different weights of a pencil or something.
So Burke has her smile. John Bonet has her facial features up here.
If you have no further observations, we'll move to the next lettering. The what looks like could be an S.
Or it looks like it could be a 5.
Okay,
at the
could be a
top.
5 too. Any similarities or dissimilarities between the two?
The one on the left is larger than the one on the right. The one on the right looks more like an S than the one on the left. The one on the left is more circular, kind of on the bottom. Then the one on the right is, the bottom portion looks more angular. Sort of.
We have the same stip on this.
Same stipulation. Any other observations of either similarities or dissimilarities before I move on, Mrs. Ramsey?
No.
I'll ask you to look at the top and final one. What I would identify as a D, but that doesn't mean it is a D. I'd like you to look at that and tell me what similarities or dissimilarities that you see there. And Lynn, of course, we have the same stip.
The left one looks like an A to me, and the right one looks like a D. It looks like maybe a shaky or older person might have written it. Kind of squiggly. This one has a higher, the one on the right has a higher stick on the side than the one on the left.
Right.
And the open space, the donut hole is bigger on the one on the right than the left.
Burke has her reasoning pattern.
But I don't think they look alike.
All right. Fair
And they're
enough.
like two different letters to me.
Thank you for putting up with that exercise. And Mr. Wood, thank you also. Okay.
He has her reasoning pattern in her way of speech.
Okay. You remember earlier we had I had you read about the handwriting from your book, and I would say that maybe we both concede that the handwriting is an important part of the evidence in this crime.
She can speak for herself, but we're not going to have her speaking.
All right, no, I'm sorry.
No concessions.
No, okay.
She's answered your questions about that and with respect to her beliefs.
I'm just using that foundationally
That's okay.
to
Just wanna
go,
make
move
sure.
on so that there's no question as to why I'm moving into a particular area. And it goes to the issue of why Mr. Wolf is here in this lawsuit with respect to some elements of it. Why in the complaint there is what may appear to you to be an extremely unfair accusation or representation of you as author of the ransom note, as the person who killed her daughter or whatever. And a lot of this is to try and determine the degree to which the handwriting experts that Mr. Wolf is using in this case can accurately determine whether you are in fact the author of the ransom note or not, which is part of why we've been doing this. I just want to show you something that is, I just want you to look at it, and it again is why, so to speak, why I would like you to mark this for Plaintiff's Exhibit 11, and I'm going to show this. Now, I'm not making any representations in this document as to whether, in fact, its submission means anything other than this was prepared by to handwriting experts. This document is not being submitted to prove the truth of anything in the document. So if you could mark that, and Lynn will stipulate to that effect. Would you mark this document as Plaintiff's Exhibit 11? Now, Mrs. Ramsey, tell you that that document, along with reports, handwriting reports, were prepared by document examiners Sina Wong and David Liebman. And other handwriting was used in the form of the police exemplars that were given to.
Her eyes are fixed on him and anything that he's presenting, extremely attentive. I noted that she had her head kind of tilted, so she's kind of attentive, and questioning, and what's coming next. What do you got next for me? Still on edge, still eager to see what's next.
To my office by Mr. Wood pursuant to discovery request. And those documents are, without a doubt, your handwriting, because they were identified by Mr. Wood as being the handwriting exemplars that you personally gave to law enforcement in Colorado at their request during that 5-day period. Now, the problem for Mr. Wolf in this case is the fact that not one of the experts, Sina Wong, David Liebman, an expert known as Gideon Epstein, Larry F. Ziegler, and an expert known as Don Lacey, have all identified you as the ransom note writer. There's no, it's not a close call as far as they're concerned. They have identified you. One of them, in fact, said, without doubt, you are the author of the ransom note. So in order to be certain that they are in fact correct in what they are looking at as examples of your handwriting, I wanted you to look at some of the documents that I gave you. And now I want you to look at the document there and see why, in fact, the issue of your authorship is such a problem.
Do you have a question?
Yes.
Let's ask the question.
Okay. Mrs. Ramsey,
I'm just trying to lay a foundation, Mr. Wood. I'm just trying to lay a foundation so we're all on the same page. Because you told me that you were 4.5 out of 5 in terms of not being identified as the ransom writer at all. But we got an expert saying that without a doubt, you are the ransom note writer.
did you write the ransom note? Mrs. Ramsey, did you write the ransom note?
And before you answer that, I want to object to the form of the question. And I want to specifically object to each and every one of the prefatory comments with respect to that question, which started off a long time ago, where you said to move on, so there was no question why I'm moving into a particular area. By Mr. Hoffman, it goes to the issue of why Mr. Wolf is here in this lawsuit, beginning at that point, down through and including everything except for your stipulation, which we will accept. I want to move to strike all of the prefatory comments from that beginning down through where you said and ended. Now I want you to look at the document there and see why, in fact, this, the question of your authorship, I believe, is a problem. All of those are improper as to form. I move to strike each and every one of them with the exception of your stipulation. I also want to tell you that I was very courteous in letting you sit here and in effect lecture my client. That is your one and only lecture, Mr. Hoffman. You are here to ask questions. Now, your question, as I understand it, if you'd like to restate it, is did Patsy Ramsey write the ransom note? Is that the question?
Yes, it is.
Why don't you restate that? Because I think the other question isn't worth the paper it's written on or the time you've taken up to ask it, because it's totally improper as to its form.
All right.
Now,
Now,
ask her a question.
First of all, I'm going to...
Okay, Mr. Wood. What are you going to do? You going to put your hands on me? Man, sit your bad attitude behind down. Ain't got no time. But look, we're trying to get to the bottom of this, and you have told us, I'm just trying to set a foundation, which I told you I was doing. I told you I was setting a foundation. I told you that. I set a foundation. Now, what you want to do, and this is what I'm saying, you're trying to control the narrative of the script, right? So I want to strike. So the lawyer was like, I want to strike all of this from when you started talking all the way down to when you mentioned the experts and everything, because if we leave that in record, we can return back to that as an element to say, hey, we have on record that experts believe that you wrote this note. You want to strike all of that so that it cannot be on record anywhere. We're not playing these games. And then you want to threaten me to stay in line is essentially what Mr. Wood is doing. He's trying to threaten Mr. Hoffman to stay in line because the only card that they have to play is that we're going to get up and walk out. That's what he's essentially non-verbally threatening.
Respond to your ad hominem attack.
It's not an ad hominem attack.
It's an ad hominem attack, and it's done for the purposes of grandstanding, which, seems to be the way you're operating.
Take that up with Judge Carnes. Why don't you just ask the question?
No, I'm going to respond to your ad hominem colloquy, which was in effect an attack on me. I was not lecturing Mrs. Ramsey, and Mrs. Ramsey, I apologize if I, in fact...
You don't have to respond to that.
You
have a question, Mr. Hoffman?
No, Mr. Wood, I'm going to respond to your ad hominem attack, which is what I consider it to be. Fact is, I was not lecturing Mrs. Ramsey. I was explaining to Mrs. Ramsey, prefatory to asking her a question which could be regarded as very insensitive, which is simply, did you write the ransom note, as to why I was asking that question. And quite frankly, I don't think it was improper of me to show a certain sensitivity to a mother whose daughter has died rather brutally.
Darnay, you have not shown this family any sensitivity since March of 1997. Now, let me stop you here.
That's not before.
No, sir, let me stop you here.
More grandstanding from you, Mr. Wood. More dramatic insults.
I am not going to sit here and have you go back and forth and talk with my client or lecture my client. You are here under the federal rules of civil procedure to ask questions.
Yes.
I have the right to make an objection. If you deem my objection to be an ad hominem attack, take it up with Judge Carnes. I believe that my objection is 100% good. Now, ask a question, let's get answers, and let's move on. We don't need the back and forth every time I make an objection. Okay? Please, let's get going.
You're responsible for some degree for the back and forth. Quite frankly, under the federal rules, I don't think you have the right to interfere and try to control my deposition.
I have the right to make an objection. I did make an objection, and
but
I
not
asked you to
as an
state your
attack on
question.
counsel, which is what, in fact, this was. This was an ad hominem attack. You characterized what I was doing with your client as lecturing her.
I think the
as
record
showing
will
a
speak
lack
for
of.
itself.
And also, I think that you spoke outside of anything that was going on here, which was to conduct that you consider to be improper on my part outside of this deposition.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You just
now.
made a reference. You can read it right back to my lack of sensitivity to the
when you sit
Ramsey
here-
family in general.
You're the one making
I'm
representations
talking
on the record about being
why.
concerned.
No, I'm not
Darnay.
making representations. I'm
wasting
explaining.
all of our time now,
No,
Darnay.
this is my time. Okay? This is my
wanna
deposition
waste it?
time, and I'm going to make a record responding to your ad hominem attack on counsel.
Why don't you go ahead and make that record?
I've
When
just
you're
been
through,
making it.
She'll come back and she'll answer questions. You don't have to sit here and listen to this, Mrs.
If
Ramsey.
she doesn't want to, that's fine.
You don't have to. You can take a break and you can go ahead and make your response. And when you have a
whatever
question, we'll bring her back in here and we'll answer all your questions.
All right,
They're properly formed.
Okay, now, all right. What we'll do is this. I'm going to ask Mrs. Ramsey a very simple question.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ramsey, did you write the ransom note that was discovered by yourself?
Ha ha ha. She was shaking her head, yes. Very slowly. She could construe it as saying, oh no, I was shaking my head, trying to understand the question. But she was shaking her head, yes, very slowly. You could construe it as, what's your question? What's your question? No, you could construe it as that. But she was shaking her head, yes.
On December 26, 1996, at your home.
No, sir, I did not.
Okay, thank you. Now, at this point, I think we'll take a break. I think this would be an appropriate time to take a break. Thank you.
I want to see it again.
Ask Mrs. Ramsey a very simple question.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ramsey, did you write the ransom note that was discovered by yourself on December 26, 1996?
And so he said, did you write the ransom note? And she was going like this. And the more he said, you write, she started to shake a little slower. And then ultimately she cut off shaking her head. Yes. But then you saw her eyes blinking, going this direction and thinking.
At your home.
No, sir, I did not.
Okay, thank you. Now, at this point, I think we'll take a break. I think this would be an appropriate time to take a break. Thank you.
Well, video record
Yeah.
at 10:55. We're on video record at 11:07.
Okay.
Ha. Oh man. So there's a lot of frustration going on because I'm hot on your trail. And I think they're well aware of that. And they're trying to prevent it. They're just trying to prevent it from happening. So that's very interesting, man. That's the video. Comment, like, share, subscribe, engage. Let me know what you think. Maybe I'm tripping. I could be, I'm not perfect, but yeah. Until next video, take it easy.